When I say the word hijab, what is the very first image that pops into your head? I'm willing to bet good money it's a woman, specifically, a woman wearing a headscarf. It's almost become the universal symbol for Muslim women in the media, in politics, everywhere. But what if I told you that we've been looking at only half the picture? Or maybe we've been looking at the second half of the picture, completely missing the first?
You would be absolutely right. It's actually one of the most common misconceptions out there. We tend to fixate on the object, the cloth, rather than the concept. If you actually go back to the source text, to the Quran, and look at the order of revelation and the way the instructions are laid out, the command for hijab doesn't start with women at all. It starts with men.
That is going to surprise a lot of people. You rarely hear the phrase men's hijab tossed around in casual conversation. Usually, the pressure and the scrutiny are entirely focused on women. So, are you saying men are supposed to be wearing headscarves too? Or is this a different kind of hijab?
It's a completely different application of the same root principle. The word hijab literally means a barrier, a partition, or a cover. It's not just a noun for a piece of fabric, it's a system of modesty and boundaries. In the Quran, in Surah An-Nur, God addresses men first. He says, "Tell the believing men to reduce some of their vision and guard their private parts." This is the essence of the male hijab. It is primarily the hijab of the eyes.
The hijab of the eyes. I like that phrasing. But let's break that down practically. Does that mean walking around looking at the floor? Because in a modern city, that sounds like a recipe for walking into a lamppost.
It's not about blinding yourself to the world. It's about lowering the gaze, or gad al-basar. Think of it as a filter for your input. We live in an attention economy where everything is designed to grab your eye: billboards, pop-up ads, social media feeds. The male hijab is an act of spiritual discipline where a man refuses to objectify or consume women with his eyes. It's a proactive refusal to stare. It's saying, "I respect you enough not to undress you with my gaze." It's an internal barrier before it ever becomes an external one.
That's fascinating because it shifts the responsibility. Usually, the narrative is, women should cover up so men don't get tempted. But this framing says, men, control your eyes regardless of what anyone is wearing.
Exactly. It places the burden of self-control squarely on the man. Even if a woman were walking down the street completely unclothed, the obligation on the man to look away remains exactly the same. His hijab is independent of her actions. But, of course, there is also a physical dress code for men, which is often overlooked.
Right. I assume they can't just wear whatever they want. What are the physical boundaries for men?
The minimum standard is covering the aura, which for men is defined as the area from the navel to the knee. This must be covered loosely, not with tight clothing that reveals the shape. So, those super tight gym shorts or compression gear worn without shorts on top. Technically, that violates the male hijab. But again, the physical covering is the baseline. The heavy lifting for men is in the behavior and the gaze.
Okay, so we've established that men have to initiate this cycle of modesty. Let's pivot to the side everyone talks about, women. If men are doing their job lowering their gaze, acting respectfully, why is the physical covering for women so much more extensive?
That is the million-dollar question. To understand this, we have to look at the two distinct terms used in the Quran, which often get lumped together under the umbrella of hijab. There is the himar and the hilbab.
I've heard those terms, but help me distinguish them. Khimar is the head covering, right?
Correct. The himar is specifically the cloth that covers the head and extends down to cover the chest. Historically, women in pre-Islamic Arabia used to wear head coverings that trailed down their backs, leaving the neck and upper chest exposed. The revelation came to tell them to take that cloth and draw it over their chests. It was about covering the vulnerable areas, the areas of beauty. Then you have the jilbab, which is the outer garment. Think of it like a coat or a cloak that you wear over your home clothes when you go out in public. It creates a silhouette that obscures the specific curves of the body.
So the logic is to blur the lines of the body?
Precisely. The objective isn't to make a woman disappear, it's to shift the focus of interaction. When the physical form is shielded, the interaction is forced to happen on an intellectual and spiritual level. It's a statement that says, my body is not for public consumption. You don't have access to me visually unless I grant it.
That's an empowering way to look at it. It reminds me of privacy settings on a social media profile. You lock it down so only the people you trust, your inner circle, get to see the full picture. Everyone else gets the public profile professional, guarded, safe.
That is a brilliant analogy. It really is about privatizing one's beauty. In Islam, the family unit is the sanctuary. A woman doesn't wear hijab in front of her husband, her father, her brothers, or other women. In that private sphere, she is completely open. The hijab is the boundary between the public square and the private sanctuary. It protects the intimacy of the private sphere from becoming cheapened by the public gaze.
But I have to play devil's advocate here because this is what listeners will be thinking. It's hard to ignore the fact that in many parts of the world, this doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a uniform enforced by men. How do you reconcile the spiritual ideal of privacy with the reality of compulsion?
That is a valid and necessary critique. The tragedy happens when the form is enforced without the spirit. If a woman is forced to cover up, she might be wearing the cloth, but she isn't practicing hijab in the spiritual sense, because intention niyah is the foundation of all Islamic acts. If the intention isn't to please God but to avoid punishment from a father or a government, the spiritual value is hollowed out. Hijab is meant to be an act of devotion, a personal relationship between the woman and God. When you turn it into merely a state law or a cultural pressure, you strip away that divine connection.
So, true hijab requires agency. It has to be a conscious decision.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the third dimension of hijab, which applies to both men and women equally, the hijab of the heart, or haya.
Haya. That translates to shyness or modesty, right?
Yes, but it's deeper than just being shy. It's a sense of dignity and self-respect. It's the feeling of discomfort you get when you do something beneath your station. You can have a man looking at the floor and a woman covered from head to toe, but if their speech is vulgar, if they are loud and obnoxious, if they are flirting inappropriately, they have broken the hijab.
This is where it gets really relevant to the modern world. I'm thinking about social media again. You see people who might be dressed modestly according to the technical rules, but their behavior on TikTok or Instagram screams, "Look at me."
That is the paradox of our time. You can wear the uniform of modesty while chasing the currency of vanity. If you are wearing a hijab, but you are posing in a way that is designed specifically to be seductive or to garner likes and validation based on your appearance, there is a dissonance there. The outer shell is Islamic, but the inner core is secular vanity. The goal of hijab is to liberate you from the need for external validation of your physical self. If you just transfer that need for validation to a digital platform, you've missed the point.
That's a heavy realization. It implies that hijab isn't a destination. It's a constant struggle. It's not like you put on the scarf or lower your eyes once and you're done.
It's a daily practice. It's a lifestyle. And it's countercultural. We live in a world that screams, if you have it, flaunt it. Capitalism relies on insecurity. It relies on us feeling like we need to be seen, admired, and consumed to matter. Hijab is a radical rejection of that consumerist mindset. It says, I am valuable because of my mind, my soul, and my relationship with the Creator, not because of how much skin I show or how expensive my watch is.
It's interesting you mention capitalism. In a way, modesty is anti-consumerist. It stops the body from being a commodity. But let's circle back to the men for a second. We talked about the eyes and the dress code. Is there a behavioral element for men that mirrors the women's experience?
There is. It's about how they occupy space. There is a concept of humility in walking. The Quran mentions not walking upon the earth with arrogance. For a man, hijab also means not using his physical presence to intimidate or dominate. It's about gentleness. The Prophet of Islam was described as being more modest than a virgin in her private quarters. That was the ideal of masculinity, not toxic aggression, but profound, dignified modesty.
That completely flips the script on the alpha male stereotypes we see online today. So, if we zoom out, we are looking at a system where men restrain their eyes and their ego, and women shield their privacy and their beauty, and both parties meet in the middle with mutual respect.
That is the ideal architecture of a society. It's not about oppression, it's about protection and focus. It removes the sexual tension from the public sphere so that human beings can interact as human beings, not as potential conquests or objects of desire. It clears the air.
It clears the air. I like that. It removes the static, so you can hear the signal.
Exactly. And for the listener who might be struggling with this, whether it's a guy trying to control his gaze in a hypersexualized world, or a woman trying to decide if she wants to wear the headscarf, it helps to remember that it's not just a rulebook. It's a shield. It's there to preserve your energy for the things and the people that actually matter.
It's a beautiful way to frame it. It stops being a list of do-nots and starts being a to-do list for your soul. We are nearing the end of our time, but I want to leave the listeners with a thought on the future. As the world gets more digital, more visual, and arguably more superficial, do you think the concept of hijab will become harder to maintain, or will it become more necessary?
I think it will become infinitely more difficult, but also infinitely more precious. In a world of total exposure, where privacy is dead and everyone is a public commodity, choosing to cover, choosing to withhold, choosing modesty will become the ultimate act of rebellion. It will be the ultimate punk rock move. To say, no, you don't get to see this, is the reclaiming of power. The hijab of the future isn't just religious compliance, it's the last fortress of the self.
The ultimate act of rebellion. That is a powerful note to end on. We often think of freedom as taking everything off, but maybe real freedom is the power to choose what you keep for yourself.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you for this deep dive. It certainly changed the way I look at a piece of cloth and the way I'll be walking down the street tomorrow.
My pleasure. Keep your eyes lowered and your spirits high.
We'll see you next time.